"You didn't file a lawsuit to help California, Governor," the voice from the speakerphone echoed, sharp and clear as steel. "You filed it to cover your tracks. We're not just defending against your frivolous claims, Gavin. We're exposing them." The line went silent. But in the sterile quiet of the federal courtroom, the explosion was just about to begin. The morning sun cast long, imposing shadows across the Oval Office. But inside, the atmosphere was one of focused calm. President Donald Trump sat behind the resolute desk, a fortress of mahogany and history. Across from him sat his White House counsel, a man whose calm demeanor belied a razor-sharp legal mind. They weren't discussing polls or policy, they were preparing for war. "He's going for the jugular in the press, Mr. President," the counsel said, gesturing to a tablet displaying Governor Gavin Newsom's latest media blitz. "He's painting this as David versus Goliath, a noble state fighting federal tyranny." Trump leaned back, a flicker of profound annoyance in his eyes. Goliath was a bully, a loudmouth who thought noise could win a fight. The man who beat him just had one smooth stone and a whole lot of truth. "That's all we need." He motioned toward a stack of binders on his desk. "Newsom's lawsuit isn't about protecting California. It's about a pot of federal money he wants for his pet project, the California Green Future Initiative. He claims we're maliciously blocking it." Trump's voice lowered, losing its public bravado and taking on a tone of strategic precision. "We aren't blocking it. We're auditing it. There's a difference. We have a duty to the American taxpayer to ensure their money isn't being funneled into a black hole of mismanagement. The numbers coming out of that project don't add up. They stink." "His legal team will argue federal overreach," the counsel noted. "Let them," Trump countered, his gaze firm. "They can bring the performance. You bring the facts. Their case is built on sand, arrogant, loud, and ready to collapse. Ours is built on rock. Let's see which one is standing when the storm hits." Hours later, outside the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse, the storm was already a hurricane of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Governor Gavin Newsom stood at a podium, his face a mask of practiced outrage. His suit was impeccable, his hair perfectly coiffed, a stark contrast to the fiery, righteous anger he was projecting. "Today, we stand for the people of California against an administration that seeks to punish us for our ideals," Newsom boomed, his voice resonating with theatrical gravity. "President Trump is personally and maliciously blocking a vital initiative, the California Green Future, a program that would create thousands of jobs and secure a cleaner planet for our children. He is using the full weight of the federal government to wage a personal vendetta, and we are here today to say, no more. We will not be bullied." It was a masterful performance. He was the valiant knight, the defender of progress, fighting a vindictive, power-hungry dragon. He spoke of ideals, of the future, of justice. He never once mentioned the numbers. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The chamber was packed. Newsom sat with his legal team, a smug, confident look on his face. He nodded at a few journalists, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips, as if to say, "Watch this." His lead attorney, a high-priced litigator known for his courtroom theatrics, began their argument. He paced before the judge, his voice a symphony of indignation. He spoke of, quote, "unprecedented federal hostility, punitive overreach, and a, quote, politically motivated blockade." He painted a picture of a benevolent state government being crushed under the boot of a vindictive president. It was compelling, emotional, and almost entirely devoid of concrete evidence. Finally, it was the White House counsel's turn. He didn't pace, he didn't raise his voice. He walked calmly to the lectern and placed a single, thin folder before him. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and clear, "we are not here to debate the governor's feelings. We are here to discuss federal law and fiscal responsibility." He addressed the claims of overreach directly, citing the specific statutes that mandated federal oversight for the very funds Governor Newsom was demanding. It was dry, factual, and methodical. Then he sprung the trap. Governor Newsom's entire case rests on the premise that his, quote, California Green Future Initiative is a legitimate, well-managed project being unfairly targeted, the council stated. He claims the federal government has no right to question his administration's handling of these potential funds. We believe otherwise. In fact, we believe the American people have a right to see exactly what they are being asked to fund. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. Therefore, Your Honor, pursuant to the Federal Accountability and Transparency Act of 1998, which is triggered when a state requests discretionary funds of this magnitude, we are not merely moving to dismiss this frivolous lawsuit. We are filing a counter-motion to compel the immediate and unredacted release of all financial records, contracts, and internal communications related to the California Green Future Initiative, dating from its inception. A gasp went through the courtroom. Newsom, who had been leaning back with a look of detached amusement, sat bolt upright. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of panic. His lawyers shot to their feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is an outrageous fishing expedition. Newsom's attorney sputtered, his theatrical composure shattered. This is a blatant attempt to intimidate and harass a state government. It has no bearing on the matter at hand. The White House counsel didn't flinch. On the contrary, Your Honor, it has every bearing. The governor has put the legitimacy of his project at the very center of this lawsuit. He has opened the door. The law now requires him to walk through it. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense appointee, looked down at the motion, then over her glasses at Newsom's frantic legal team. The counsel's motion is legally sound. The statute is clear. The request for these specific funds does indeed trigger the transparency clause. The motion is granted. The state of California will produce the requested documents for this court's review. Now, the color drained from Gavin Newsom's face. The clash had begun. It took less than an hour for the state's IT liaisons, under court order, to transfer the encrypted files. The courtroom waited in breathless silence. The White House counsel directed the court clerk to project the first set of documents onto the large screens behind the judge. It was a list of primary contractors for the Green Future Project. Let's start with the top 5 contractors, the counsel said, his voice cutting through the tension. All 5, as you can see, are major donors to Governor Newsom's political campaigns. Coincidence, perhaps, but let's look at the contracts themselves. He brought up the next file. The numbers were staggering. Inflated costs, multi-million-dollar contracts for, quote, consulting services with no clear deliverables. He pointed to one. This company, Golden State Solutions, was awarded a $15 million contract for, quote, community outreach strategy. A public record search reveals this company was incorporated just 6 weeks before the contract was awarded. It has no employees, no website, and its registered address is a P.O. box in Sacramento. Another document flashed on the screen, an internal budget. Millions were allocated to a line item labeled Discretionary Environmental Impact Studies. And here, the counsel said, his voice like ice, we have the project's discretionary fund. Let's trace one of these payments. He clicked, and a new file opened, showing a wire transfer of $2.8 million from the Green Future Project to an offshore account held by a shell corporation. This, Your Honor, is not a green initiative. It's a slush fund, a sophisticated mechanism for laundering taxpayer aspirations into political capital and personal enrichment. He turned his gaze from the judge and looked directly at Gavin Newsom across the courtroom. The room was deathly quiet. Every eye was locked on the governor, whose face was now a pallid mask of fury and humiliation. The President of the United States didn't block this project out of malice, Governor, the counsel declared, his voice ringing with righteous power. He blocked it because it's a fraud. Your lawsuit here today was a desperate, arrogant gamble. You hoped to use the power of the courts and the sympathy of the media to bully the federal government into funding your corruption. You weren't counting on one thing, that we would bring the receipts. It was over. The legal argument was annihilated. The moral high ground had crumbled into a sinkhole of scandal. News alerts were already lighting up the phones of the reporters in the gallery. Corruption scandal engulfs Governor Newsom's office amid failed lawsuit against White House. Newsom shoved his chair back and stormed out of the courtroom, his face contorted in a silent snarl of rage. He was immediately swarmed by the very reporters he had so confidently courted just hours before. But their questions were no longer about federal tyranny. They were about shell corporations, political donors, and offshore accounts. Back in the Oval Office that evening, the television screens were filled with the fallout. President Trump watched, his expression unreadable. He wasn't celebrating. He looked like a man who had done a hard, unpleasant job that had to be done. It was never about him, Trump said quietly, more to himself than to his counsel. It was about the people of California who were being lied to. It was about every taxpayer in this country whose money was about to be stolen. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Washington Monument lit against the night sky. Now the real work can begin. We'll get that infrastructure built, and we'll do it honestly. The court had ruled in his favor, but the real victory was in the court of public opinion, where the truth, armed with indisputable facts, had won the day. What do you think is more damaging to a public figure? A political loss, or the exposure of a moral failing? Share your perspective below, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories.